President Trump has officially signed a declaration of disaster for Puerto Rico. In a tweet, the island's governor thanked the president for his commitment to helping Puerto Rico as it continues to recover from hundreds of earthquakes and aftershocks.
So this comes just one day after the Trump administration released more than $8 billion in heavily restricted aid for Hurricanes Maria and Irma. You remember that happened a few years ago.
That's right. Filmmaker and writer Andrew Padilla is here with more. Good to see you. So the president is restricting aid to Puerto Rico for Hurricane Maria, and one of those restrictions is on spending money on the power grid. Why is the power grid so essential in this particular instance?
Well, a lot of the people that lost power in this recent series of earthquakes, over 1,002 some odd weeks, they also lost it during Maria. Right? And so the grid has been unstable since before Maria. So that's what makes this restriction even crazier.
Do we know what the reasoning is behind this restriction? Because I remember, at the time of the hurricanes, that was one of the top conversations, that the power grid already wasn't the best. And so would it be able to sustain not one hit, but two hits? And, it wasn't able to sustain it. What's the that you would think that would be a primary place to put the aid?
The power grid goes down in light rain. It's very clear that Trump does not care about Puerto Rico. The estimated damages and the need to recover after Hurricane Maria, the Puerto Rican government told Congress was somewhere around $139 billion.
So $8 billion is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, and
that was right
he was illegally holding this, right? Like, so this is where we're at. And now in this recent moment with the earthquake, it's a little, I mean, Maria was scary. This is scary in its own way. There are so many people that have been displaced, economically displaced from the island. This $8 billion is a drop in the bucket. You have people leaving every day. The UN says Puerto Rico's population is going to be 2 million by the end of this century. We lost 500,000 before Maria. We are in a population crisis. And so by denying these funds, it's a clear message that they want the island to depopulate. There's really no other answer because the United States has the power and the money to support us.
Well, you also tweeted that the collapse of infrastructure on the island is not a result of bad luck, but as a result of colonialism. Explain that.
Well, the United States right now is dealing with Puerto Rico in a different way than other states. It's not that other states have had wonderful disaster recoveries. But Puerto Rico's government before these disasters had a fiscal control board that was controlling its finances, right? Democratic control of budgets have been usurped in Puerto Rico. That's part of the reason the power grid is the way it is, why the water's poisoned. And if you look, what's happening in Puerto Rico, it's actually happening in other places in the U.S. Look at Flint. Right? If you look at Flint, Michigan, why did they deal with the poisoning of their water? There was a fiscal manager that was changing their water sources, right, to save money. So some of these affect U.S. states. Some of this affects U.S. states. But colonialism, we have been suffering under U.S. rule since 1898, right? Puerto Rico cannot determine its own fate. It now cannot control its own economy. And the U.S. doesn't want to help with the funds to rebuild. So where does that leave us?
So should Puerto Rico become a state, or would you like to see it independent?
I want Puerto Rico to have the right to determine its own future and the support to rebuild and accomplish that. And that's something that, while the U.S. government isn't doing, thankfully people throughout this city, throughout this country, throughout the diaspora are doing what they can to try and help Puerto Rico rebuild. We just had a fundraiser in East Harlem yesterday. We're close to 10,000 raised. And that's supporting Brigada Solidaria del Oeste. That's why I'm like a little tired. We had a wonderful night last night. Brigada Solidaria del Oeste, Coordinadora Paz para la Mujer, two organizations that are helping recover in the South. So while the U.S. government isn't supplying that aid, the diaspora, all of us are getting together to try and fill those gaps. It's just a shame that we have to keep doing that.
And so how do you have faith in the government then? I mean, we all watched sort of post-hurricanes, the governor's crisis where no one wanted the job. You remember that, right?
Yeah,
in Puerto Rico. And certainly, the president waiting years to distribute aid for the hurricanes that cannot build the Puerto Ricans' faith in their government, federal government and local government.
No one in Puerto Rico, I mean, very few people have faith in the Puerto Rican government, very few have faith in the U.S. government. That's why, who's there for us? It's us. We keep each other safe. It's up to individuals who care. The U.S. government doesn't, but individual U.S. citizens do. And Puerto Ricans throughout the country, have been stepping up, and non-Puerto Ricans have been stepping up. It's up to us to do it. Trump obviously doesn't care. We're beyond that. So what are we doing to step up? And there's a couple good fundraisers I want people to know about tonight. The New York State Nurses Association is going to be at 131 West 33rd Street, second floor auditorium. They're doing a medical brigade to Utuado, and then I'm co-hosting a fundraiser at Beer Wax on the 28th, which will be supporting Brigada Solidaria del Oeste, which again is doing really good relief work, getting medical supplies out, brigades, and trying to think more sustainably about how we move forward, which is something, again, sadly, the U.S. government isn't thinking through.
It's good that you point out these fundraisers that are happening because there is such a lack of, people need to donate to our fellow Americans because they're in dire straits, and the fact that these fundraisers
we need to donate to them because they're humans, right? Not because they're Americans. Our citizenship has nothing to do with this. We need to support Puerto Ricans because they're humans in crisis, because we are being forced from our island. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but that's always the narrative.
Yeah.
We hear this all the time. Oh, we have to support them because they're Americans too. And that's a narrative you've heard, especially from Democrats, and that needs to get out. It needs to get out.
Well, there's
right
a lot
now.
of people on the earth who need just as much help.
And there's a lot of people,
and other places.
Absolutely.
So I
And
think
there's
that
also
to galvanize people in this country to help our fellow citizens is, I think, probably what most people are thinking of. Although you're right, we could solve world hunger.
I think people still need educating too about
to know we are citizens.
Exactly.
Right. Which is the wild part. It goes back to colonialism. A lot of it is invisibility. It's people finding out that we existed after Hurricane Maria and remembering, oh, I guess they still need help after this crisis. Meanwhile, we've been going through it.
I think you're right to point out the colonialism, the history. I think if people read the history of Puerto Rico, they would see why Puerto Rico is where it is right now.
Yeah.
And it's not because Puerto Ricans can't get it together. There's a long history there.
And going to the insular cases, that's exactly it. We are property of, but we're not part of the U.S. And that is at the root. That colonial relationship is at the root of the inequity when it comes to funding in normal times or in crisis.
Andrew Padilla, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and thank you for supporting.
Absolutely.